As you can imagine, we are gonna be working on the Bozozoku Crusader for the first time in a long time. The first thing we need to do to this thing is prep it for a drive. We need to drive it to an alignment shop. That way we can actually pull some of the camber out of the rear and make sure that the front is where we want it to be before we mount our flares in orientation to the way the tires are. But basically, we're gonna have to drive this thing, and there is not nearly enough clearance to be able to do that. So especially in the rear, we're gonna have to clearance up and around a little bit, and then in the front I want to clearance a little bit for steering. This tire did hit a little bit of the fender. You can see that it brought this in a little bit. So what we're gonna do is make sure that the wheel can turn almost all the way. One thing that I'm sure some of you guys will notice is that now there is a spacer on this thing. There is a 1-inch spacer all the way around. Sadly, there is no way to get around this because the fronts wouldn't clear the calipers. And I tried a smaller spacer and I moved up a little bit until I found out that I'm basically just gonna need a 1-inch spacer. So I did a 1-inch spacer in the front, and then obviously I don't want the front wider than the rear. So I just got 1-inch spacers all the way around. I really didn't want to have to run spacers, but whatever, it's gonna make the car a little bit wider anyways. And we're really not running a huge spacer, and it's out of necessity. So it's, I guess, not the worst thing. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and start making those slits and then try and bend this up. I'm not sure what we're gonna do about this, but we might have to try and start cutting some of that out. I'm not real sure what we're gonna do, but we'll get to it when we get to it. Although I'm pretty positive this will more than be adequate, I think that just to clean this up and make it look a lot better, obviously here was already previously cut that high, and then I kind of fubbed up there a little bit. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go back, pull these down, and I'm gonna almost like radius it. So from here all the way around and go up another inch, all the way around, and just make it look nice. The flare goes so far out and around, basically it just mounts so high and around the wheel that we could basically cut as much as we need to, so that way we're not cutting into our nice Toyo Proxy R888s. So as you can see, it's much more radius and just looks a lot better. So if the flare ever does come off at any point, it just doesn't look like complete garbage. We will be tacking these little tabs up onto the flare just to give it that rigidity back. However, I don't have the 220 plug set up for my welder. Otherwise, I would be welding those tabs on tonight. So we're gonna have to wait until that gets installed to be able to actually weld these tabs on. But then obviously, once it gets installed, we'll be able to weld these tabs up, cut everything flush, and then body work it to make it look at least halfway decent. But for right now, I'm gonna put the wheel back on. This side is as far as it can get for today, and then we're gonna move on to the front and then just duplicate it on the other side. Now that we have all 4 fenders nice and trimmed, and we should have plenty of room for not only travel, but also steering angle. As you saw, I did attempt to go back and forth once I cut this side. Obviously, the other side was still restricting it a little bit, but I cut that side just exactly the same as this. And the tire goes just inside here, and it seems like it'll have enough for a little bit of suspension travel, so if I do hit a bump while turning or something like that. But this should be more than okay for the short drive that is going to be to get it aligned, which is the next step before we can put on the fender flares. So I was just about to start this thing up and pull out the vet to be able to drive this thing. I was gonna test drive it and make sure that it wasn't rubbing or anything, and the steering angle was pretty decent, so that way we could bring it to the alignment shop. However, I totally forgot, and I don't think I showed you in the trailering video, that because I took off the whole spindle and everything, the whole assembly on the front, I had to disconnect the brake lines, and I had no brake pressure, and I had to use the e-brake. So obviously, me being here on my own, I need to wait until I get a friend here to help me bleed those brakes before we can really drive it. I totally forgot about that. It kind of would have been a little funny, just me having to use the e-brake just like I did going up that trailer. But yeah, if you didn't know, that's kind of why I wasn't able to drive it quite as good, is because I was using the e-brake as my brake. Literally, the foot pedal just went straight to the floor, and I thought it was a little strange. I thought maybe just because I hadn't driven it for a little bit, but it was because I totally forgot that there's basically no pressure in the front. Anyways, guys, I think that's gonna be it for today's video. I really wanted to take it out and do kind of like a first test drive in this video, so now it's gonna be a little bit shorter than I anticipated, but that's okay for now. In the next video, we will be bleeding the brakes, taking it out for a drive, and then possibly in the same day getting an alignment. But I also probably should do kind of ghetto like taillights in the back, just super temporary, because there are none, unless I have a friend follow me there. I'm not really 100% sure yet. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video, and peace out.
We make out for the thrill of it, mess around for the thrill of it. Don't stop now, never let this end. For the thrill of it, we can have with no regret. We make out for the thrill of it, mess around for the thrill of it. Don't stop now, never let this end. For the thrill of it, we can have with no regret. without regrets. Girl,